Okay. Today's daf is Daf Pei Daled Masechta Gittin. We're starting from the top of the page, Tana Rabbana. Okay, so let me make it bigger.
Okay, Tuna Rabbonim.
Tana Rabbana. So a man says to his wife, Harei ze gitach. I love this. This is condition. Harei ze gitach. Here's your get. Amanas on condition shetinasi leploini, that you have to marry my friend. Let's say here's the condition. I'm giving you a divorce, but marry so and so.
He's a friend.
So it's a good friend, right? You take my wife. So you see, the problem is because it looks like they're swapping, even though it should be okay. Why not? This is he has a get, so she can marry his friend, but it looks like they're swapping wives. So the Brisa says, "Harezu loitinasi," she should not get married. V'imni says, if she does get married, loitate say she doesn't have to leave him. So it doesn't say she shouldn't get married to who, and if she married whom, she doesn't go out. What's the Brisa is cryptic. So the Gemara says, "My Kamar," what is the explanation of the Brisa? So the Gemara attempts a few attempts, and then till it finally gets to the bottom line. Omar Rav Nachman says, "Hochi Kamar." This is what the Brisa means to say. Harei zu loy tinasi loy. She cannot marry that person. Even though the get was on condition that you marry the person, she should not marry that person. Why? Shema yomru. People will say, Nishreim noisnim b'matana. A man is giving away his wife as a gift. He only divorced his wife, so that his friend could marry the man. So that's what the Brisa says. Be'im nisas le'acher. But if she married a strange man, not part of somebody else, she doesn't have to get a divorce. Now here is a big problem. The condition of the get was she could only marry that man. And so if she got married to somebody else, okay, we let them stay together. She doesn't have to divorce that somebody else. So the Gemara says, the Gemara shrais chai v'kayim, how could that be? It turns out if she married somebody else, she didn't keep the condition, and therefore she's still an Ashes ish. So that's the Gemara's question. Umishum gezera, because you don't want to look like people are swapping wives. Loy machbina mine, we will not force her to give a get if she married a strange man, a different person. V'sharin and Ashes ish la'alma, and we're going to allow this woman who now is going to be considered to be a married woman. She's going to allow to be marry somebody else. The fact is, the first guy only gave her a get on condition she marries so-and-so. If she marries somebody else, then she's not mugareshes, she's not divorced. So how do we say that if she married somebody else, she could remain married? She's an Ashes ish. Ella Omar Rav Nachman Hochi Kamar. This is how you read the Brisa. Harei zu loy tinase loy. She's not supposed to marry the guy. Okay, the guy that was the condition that she should get married to, she should not marry him. Why? That, Shema Yomer Nishaseyam Noisnim B'matana, that people are giving their wives as a gift. So you shouldn't marry that guy that the husband said that she has to marry. In this says loy, but if she does marry that guy, loy teitze, she doesn't have to get divorced. The mishum gezerah loy mapkinam, because it's only a drabanan saying you shouldn't marry this person. But if she married that person, so she kept the condition of the get, so it turns out she is divorced, and she married that guy, we will not force them to separate. So the Gemara says like this, that the language is not good in the Brisa. The Brisa is going to say if she married him, they don't get divorced. Amalei Rava loy hu de loy tinase. She can't marry him. But could she marry a strange man? It says, the Brisa says, don't marry him. But it's if you go with your finger against that and you say, okay, don't marry this man, but you can marry a strange person. But how could you marry a strange person? But you have to keep the condition in order to be divorced. And if you're going to marry a strange person, then it turns out she's not divorced. So how could that be pshat in the Brisa? So maybe, says the Gemara just interludes, it's possible. He didn't say, now think about this condition. He said, this is the condition. Honey, I'm giving you a divorce on condition you marry my friend. But it didn't mean that she has to be married to his friend right today. Maybe in the interim, she can marry somebody else, and then one day that person dies, and then she should marry his friend. And it turns out that she was divorced from retroactively, and maybe that's the Gemara says. There's a possibility she could marry somebody else. Why? She could marry this strange man, another person, and get divorced from that man, from another person the next day, and then go keep the condition of marrying the person that she was supposed to marry. So that's what it means. She could go ahead and marry whoever she wants in the interim, but throughout her lifetime, make sure that she eventually marries the guy that was in the condition of the get. And Rav Nachman, who explained the brisa this way, Rav Nachman is like going according to his opinion, who argued against Rav Yehuda, who says you don't have to, if there's a condition, you don't have to keep it right away. You can delay it because we trust that eventually you're going to keep the condition. The Itmar, because we learned in a brisa. Listen to this case, and I think we've come across this situation. A man says, "Koinim eine b'shinoi." I prohibit myself from sleeping hayoim today. So he prohibits himself from sleeping today. Im ishan lamachar. If I'm going to sleep tomorrow. So think about that. If I sleep tomorrow, then I'm not allowed to sleep today. What should he do today? So Amar Rav Yehuda said, Al Yishan Hayoim, don't sleep today. Why? Because Shema Yishan Lamacha, maybe he'll sleep tomorrow, which is the condition. And if he sleeps tomorrow, he was not supposed to sleep today. So therefore, we tell him, don't sleep today because we are afraid that you're going to sleep tomorrow. Rav Nachman says, we trust that a person will make sure not to violate the condition. Yishan Hayoim, let him sleep today. Ve'ein choishin, I'm not concerned Shema Yishan L'mocha that he's going to sleep tomorrow and retroactively violate his neder, because a person's going to be very careful not to do the avera of bringing upon himself the avera of violating a neder by sleeping tomorrow. And it turns out he wasn't supposed to sleep today. So basically, Rav Nachman is saying like this. This woman has a condition on her get. She should marry so-and-so. But Rav Nachman holds that doesn't mean you have to marry so-and-so right away. She could go in the interim, marry somebody else, and throughout her lifetime, eventually marry the person she's supposed to marry and retroactively make it a get. And Rav Nachman holds that could be good. Just like Rav Nachman holds by koinim eina beishen hayoim, Rav Nachman allows you to sleep today. So the Gemara says, Hachi hashta, how can you compare? Hasam, in the case of not sleeping today, if I sleep tomorrow, b'didei kaima, that's up to you to keep the condition. Why? Because the iboya machriz nafshei b'silvasei v'loy noim. The next day, in order to make sure you're not going to violate the neder by sleeping the next day, you'll stick your body with pins, and you're not going to make sure to fall asleep. That's why you can make sure that you could keep the condition. But if you're going to, is it in her power to get a get from the second guy? If you're going to tell her to marry a strange guy in between, who says that guy is going to give her a divorce to allow her to marry the person she's supposed to marry? It's not in her power to do that. So it's not in her power to keep the condition. How would the brisa allow her to marry somebody in between? She should first marry the guy she's supposed to marry. That keeps the condition of the get, and only then can we allow her to marry somebody else. So El Amarava, this is the final way to learn pshat in the brisa. A man said to his wife, honey, here's your get on the condition you marry my friend. So the brisa is saying, Harezu loy tinasi loy loy, she can't marry the friend, v'loy la'achen, not a strange person. Loy tinase, loy loy tinase, she can't marry the friend. Shemer Yomru, Nishaseyan, Babatana. People will say that people give women their wives as a gift. So you can't marry the person. If the condition of the get is that you should marry somebody, that is no. You're not supposed to marry that person. La'acher loitinase, to somebody else she shouldn't marry. The boya die because she has to keep the condition. So if she can't go ahead and marry a strange guy because she's still an Ashes ish, she didn't keep the condition of the get, and that would be violating be violating her Eishes Ish. The Nisas loy, that's the key. If she married him, the guy she wasn't supposed to marry, loy tzeitze, she doesn't get divorced. The shum gezerah loy mapkina, because this whole thing of not marrying the guy that was the condition, to not marrying the friend, is only because people are going to schmooze and say that we're doing wife swapping. But that's a gezerah. But if she found a rabbi to marry her, we let them stay together. La'acha, but if she married a strange person, Teitze, she gets divorced. In fact, we separate them because it turns out she's not an Ashes, she's an Ashes from the first guy because she didn't keep the condition of a get. The boy lakayumi letanoi, because she has to keep the condition of the get. Concludes the Gemara, Tanya Kavase de Rava. We have a brisa that says what Rava just said, and the explanation of Rava is absolutely correct. She can't marry the friend and not a strange person. Then Nisis loy, if she marries the friend, loy teitze, she doesn't have to separate. La'acha, but if she married a strange person, she's an Eishes. She didn't keep the condition. Teitze, she should get divorced. So we separate them. By the way, this comes up. You think this doesn't come up? If who makes a condition on a get? Don't on the get. I'm giving you the condition of the get unless you marry my friend. But what it does come out la halacha is that if it takes a while for a husband to give a get to a wife, they should not be discussing her potential remarriage to somebody else, because that gives the impression that the whole get was given so that she can marry somebody else. So they shouldn't discuss any prospects for her until she actually gets the get. That is brought in Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Nachum Gemara says something very strange, a new Gemara. A guy makes a condition that's technically impossible. Tana Rabbanan. Hareze Gita, here's your get, al manas on condition shetali l'rakia, that you should go to outer space. So in the time of the Gemara, it was impossible to reach outer space. So this was a condition that's, for obvious reasons, is an impossible condition to keep. Al manas sheterdi l'tohoim, or on condition that you go to the core of planet Earth. You somehow get there. On the condition you swallow a stick that's 8 feet tall. Or or you bring me a reed that's 200 feet tall. On condition, here's you get on condition you cross the Mediterranean Sea just with your feet. This is, I think, a hint to Yashka. Anyway, these impossibilities, if someone gives that as a condition, so you would think, okay, what kind of condition is that? Ain't a get. It's not a get. Why? Because it's impossible to keep the condition. The condition is valid. It's a valid condition. But because you can never keep the condition, the Chachamim hold it's not a get. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, but Rabbi Yehuda says kizeh get. It is a get. Because the condition is ignored. The fact that the man made an impossible condition shows that he's not even serious about the condition. So we consider it as if he never made a condition. Kalal Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema gave you a general rule. If a condition is impossible to keep at the end, and a guy put that as part of the conditions from the very beginning, he's just exaggerating and talking too much, and we just disregard what he said conditionally. The kosher and the thing that he wanted to do is kosher. So in our case, a get that was given on condition of impossible condition, so crossing the Mediterranean with your feet. So therefore, we ignore the condition. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema says it's kosher. The Chachamim says no, it's not a get because you didn't keep the condition. Omar Rab Nachman Amar Rav, halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, that halacha remains like Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. Omar Rab Nachman ben Yitzchak, Mas Nisanami Deka. The Mishnah is also precise. The Ketani, the Mishnah says, Kol she'efshar l'kaima b'soifa v'hisnal b'tchilasoi t'noi kayim. Only if you have a condition that's possible to keep. This is I think Gemara and Bava Metzia, that if you can conditions have to be possible, then it's a good condition. So we medayek call if you give an impossible condition, t'noi batal, the condition is void, nullified, void, and so that means you're going with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. Shmamina. So we prove positive that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, that it's a kosher get. So we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. If you make an impossible condition, what's the din? We ignore the condition, and therefore it's a get. So now, if you're paskening like Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, by Yehuda ben Tema, that's on physical conditions that are impossible to keep. What? Listen to this case. Here's your get on the condition that you eat non-kosher meat, chazer meat. Maho, what's the din? What would Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema say? You can't. A Jew is not allowed to eat chazer meat. Amar Abaye, he. That's the same thing. It's an impossible to keep such a condition, so the get is valid. Rava Amar says, Afsha. Rabbi Yehuda would say that it is not a good get. Why? Because she could keep the condition. Afsha del ochla, she could eat the basar chazir, the laki, and get malchus. So, La Abaya, according to Abaya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema said this word kalal. He gave you a rule that if it's an impossible to keep this, he gave you a general rule, La tuya b'sar chazir, to include that a condition that has not to eat chazer meat is also an invalid condition, and the get will be kosher. The Rava kazeh, Rava is medayik for what Yehuda ben Meseya said, that only if it's physically impossible, like to go to outer space or to walk on water, then that's not a good condition. Lama'ute, but we exclude b'sar chazir, the case of on the condition to eat basar chazir. Rava hold that Yehuda ben Tema would hold that it would not be a valid get because you're not unless you keep the condition. Beisvei, the Gemara is asking a question on Rava. Hareza gita. A man says to his wife, "Here's your get, almanasha tibali liplani, unless you have intercourse with my friend." Okay, that was the condition. So she wants her to do znus with his friend. So at the same time, tonight, if she does keep the condition, has znus with the friend, at the same time the get works. Hareza get, then she gets a get because she kept the condition. Then lav, if she doesn't have relations with the guy, ain't a get. That's not a get. But if the condition is on condition that you don't have relations with your father, that's the get. Strange condition, because why would she sleep with her own father or his father? So it's a good get. Ein choychishim will never be concerned Shem and Ivalahem that she's going to have relations with his father or her father. So that's the end of the brisa. Now the Gemara is medayik. The ilu al menashe tibali la'abel abich loikatoni. It doesn't say the condition is that on condition you have relations with my father and your father. So why does the brisa say that? Why? Because you're being over a mitzvah, and that's an impossible to keep. Loikatoni labaya, according to Bayanicha, that's why it's not a good condition, and the get would be valid. The Rava kasha, but according to Rava, why does the condition have to be on the condition you have relations with so and so? Why can't there be condition that you have relations with my father and your father, which is an avera? Elamai, whenever there's an avera, we consider that an impossible condition to keep. So according to Rava, that's not true. Rava says that if it's a avera, you could still keep, it's still a valid condition, and it would not be a good get. So how does Rava square off this brisa? Amalach Rava will tell you like this: Bishlama b'sar chazir, a condition that says don't eat chazer meat. After the achla v'laki, there's a simple way she could keep the condition. Just eat the chazer meat and get the malchus and be done with it. So she could keep the condition technically. If the condition is to have intercourse with a strange person, she can pay that guy off to have relations and then sleep with the guy and keep the condition. But to her father, is it really up to her to have relations with his father? The of the Isura, even if she wants to do an Isser, there's no telling that she'll be able to convince them to do a big Avera of Kares or Misa. It's to get his father, and will they be willing to do an Avera? So since even that is an impossible condition, because it's physically impossible, because you're relying on the agreement of somebody else, of her father and his father, and that's an impossibility. If it's impossible, that's why it's not a good condition. So L'Rava, the Gemara says like this: L'Rava, the word klal, the all-inclusive klal, says an impossible condition can be one of two things: either an outer space condition or walking on water, or having relations. The condition is to have relations with his father or her father, because there, even though it's a religious avera, who says the fathers, the father-in-law or her father are going to agree to have relations with her? But when you say only this is an impossible condition, but forcing her to eat chazar meat, maybe that's not an impossible condition, because as Rava said, she could potentially eat the chazar meat, get the malchus, and have the get work. We go to Amud Beis. La'abaya klal latuya b'sar chazir. And according to Abaya, you have the klal that Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema said, an impossible condition includes every religious action. La'atuye b'sar chazir. That includes that even if the condition is that she should eat chazar meat, that's an impossible condition to keep. But only this is impossible. What Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema exclude? Lamauti, it excludes ploini. If the condition is that she should have intercourse with so and so, that's not an impossible condition to keep, because she really has to keep the condition, because she could convince him with money, this strange person, to have relations with her, or she could convince him to marry Beheter. So therefore, it's considered a possible condition to keep. And Yehuda ben Tema holds, if it's a possible condition to keep, and as long as she doesn't keep the condition, it's not a good get. Meisvei, the Gemara asks one final question against the Baya. Baya says, Rabbi says, if it's a religious thing, it's an impossible condition to keep. Here, the Brisa says, Gita, and therefore it's a good get, right? If it's an impossible condition to keep, we ignore the condition, and the get is a valid get. Meisvei. Here's your get, on the condition you eat chazar meat. Or another example, if she's not a Kohen, right? She's a Yisraelis. Unless you eat truma, that's the condition. Or if his wife was a Nazir. So the condition is, here's your get, on condition you drink wine. So these are religious restrictions that he's forcing her to take in order for the get to be valid. So we say it's a good condition. If she keeps the condition to raise a get, vimlav ain't a get. If she doesn't keep the condition, it's not a good get. So l'Rava nicha, Rava says religious conditions are consistent valid condition. An impossible condition, physically impossible condition, going to outer space, that's an invalid condition. But this is a condition that just has a religious restriction on it, therefore it's a valid condition. But Labaya, according to Abaya, if it's a religious condition, it's also considered impossible. So if it's an impossible condition, then it should be not a good get. It should be if it's an impossible condition, it should be a valid get no matter what. So why does the Brisa says if you don't keep it in condition, it's not a good get? Abaya says, I only said my opinion in Yehuda Beit Tema. Do you say that this Brisa goes according to everybody? Money, I'll tell you who this Brisa goes. Rabbanan, he goes according to the opinion of the Rabbanan. And Rabbanan hold that that any condition is considered a valid condition, even if it's an impossible condition. Now the Gemara asks just one final question. How could a guy make a condition to his wife on condition that you eat chazar meat? That's the condition of the get. You're making a condition causing her to be over a mitzvah in the Torah. We have a general rule in Ksubis and Kedushin and Nazir and Bamatzia, all over Shas, that anybody who makes a condition on not keeping the Torah, we invalidate the condition. Let me give you an example. A guy just gets married, and he says on the Kesuba, it says that a man's supposed to provide his with food and clothing and shelter to his wife in the Kesuba. Guy says, I'm exempting myself from that. So he's making a condition to marry her with not keeping the Kesuba. So that's a mashnamas of Kosaba Torah, and therefore we ignore the condition. You can't violate and uproot something from the Torah. So how does this bichlal work in a get? How could even somebody how do we even start with this question? How could somebody make a condition in a get that the get is valid only if she eats chazar meat? What's a case who's makes a condition on something against the Torah that we invalidate the condition. Kegoin, let's say a guy's a very cheap guy and he's marrying a woman and he says, She'era, oh, he's saying, I'm not going to give you food. I'm not going to give you clothing. I'm not going to even spend time with you, intimacy. Then we ignore that because how could you uproot the marriage? That's the whole point of the marriage. He is uprooting something that's very essential to the marriage. Over here, is she uprooting something from the Torah? Here, she's uprooting something from the Torah, not him. And therefore, that's not, he could make such a condition. She's the one that's going to eat the chazer meat. Maskef lo Ravina, so Ravina asked, Klum ka'akra ihi elel kayum tonight today. It was his conditions, and that's why she's eating chazer meat. Ishtakach the ihu ka'akra. So it comes out that he's causing something to be uprooted from the Torah. Elam Ravina explained. Ki amrina masal mashas kosav Torah tonight batal kagoin she'era ksusa vaynasa the vaday ka'akra. What is the case? Who makes a condition to uproot something from the Torah? If you say you're getting married on the condition that you don't have to provide food, clothing, and intimacy. But in this case, did he say go eat chazer meat? Does she have to eat chazer meat? She has a choice not to eat the chazer meat and don't get a get. So it's not a condition that forces her to eat chazer meat, and therefore it's a good condition. One more small piece of Gemara, and then we'll stop. Ketzad, what's the case? Yasa yitlena menu. The Mishnah said a man said to his wife, "Here's your get on condition that you're permitted to marry the whole world except one person. One person, I hate this guy. I don't want to see you married to this guy." Rabbi Lezer says it's a good condition. Rabbi Chachamim said if it's not a good condition, and you have to retake it back to get from her and give it back to her and say you're permitted to marry everybody. You have to retake it back from her. Mantana, who's the author of a Mishnah? The author of a Mishnah is Rab Shimon ben Elazar, that you cannot just correct yourself while the get is in her hand. You didn't do a good giving. You have to retake the get back from her and repeat, you're now permitted to marry anybody you want. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rab Shimon ben Elazar, Shimon ben Elazar said, in a situation, listen to this, a man said to his wife, oh, here's a deed to a property. She opens it up, it's a get. So he can't just say, oh, here's your get. No, he has to retake the contract back from her and re-give it to her back and say, here's your get. He has to take it back from her and re-give it to her and say, this is your get. This is the opinion of Shimon ben Elazar. Rebbe holds you could just leave it in her hand. She thought it was a deed instrument. You tell her, no, it's your get. You don't have to retake it back from her. So our Mishnah, according to Chizkiah, the author of our Mishnah is Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilu Tema the Rebbe. You could say our Mishnah goes according to the Rebbe, Dilchain Amar, because over there, Ravina came up and told us what would be the difference between a shtar choiv, between a situation when you told her it's a deed. Rebbe says you don't have to take it back from her. Over there, you don't have to take it back from her because you didn't have a giving. You didn't have a false giving, a bad giving. You gave it to her, she thought it was a debt instrument, and then you tell her it's your get. So Rebbe says you don't have to retake it back from her, just say it's your get. But over here, you said a false giving. You said, Harei at muteris l'chol adam, except my friend. You're not allowed to marry my friend. So this was like it had a shame get to her, because even if he doesn't take it back to her, she can never marry a Kohen in case the guy dies. So it had it looks like a get. So therefore, even Rebbe would agree that you have to retake it back and re-give it to her. Over here, it's different. Since she already got it the first time, and it had some effectiveness to it that now invalidate her from ever marrying a Kohen. So in order to make it a full 100% kosher get, even Rebbe would hold that you have to retake it back from her and give it to her and say, Hareyat muteres l'chol adam. Okay, so we'll stop over here. Okay.
Thank you.